Nearly 3 years after a referendum vote to leave the European Union, lawmakers here still can't agree on how the split should happen. May saying they'll now be asked about holding another ballot.
And if the House of Commons were to vote for a referendum, it would be requiring the government to make provisions for such a referendum.
But the offer is tied to May's broader plan for Brexit, which Parliament has already rejected 3 times. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
Gordon College, an evangelical school outside of Boston, is making major cuts to budget and staff as it tries to become, quote, affordable and adaptable to students in the 21st century. But AFN's Steve Jordahl reports it has some major decisions to make.
Gordon College will cut 7% of its operating budget and will lose 13 faculty and 27 staff positions over the next 2 years. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary, says the school is trying to streamline in the age of the internet.
All private colleges that don't have massive endowments are all facing the same issues. There's a declining number of potential students. Online education is a major challenge.
Gordon is using a $10 million grant to jumpstart its online global education effort. Land says his school is headed in a similar direction.
We've made a major commitment to not only online education, but to live streaming. And we offer most of our classes at night so that people can work during the day and they can take the classes at night and they can take them from anywhere in the world.
He says the key to success for both schools is knowing which legacies to keep and which ones to let go of. At the same time, Gordon is retooling. It's facing pressure from homosexual activists on and off campus. Land says the school must carve out a space in evangelical education.
That niche is not consistent with accepting and affirming LGBTQ behavior. If Gordon tries to do both, they're going to find that they're trying to ride horses that are going in 2 opposite directions.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
Another retail business is about to shut down. Jenny Casolo has that story.
The Dress Barn women's clothing chain is closing. Parent company Ascena Retail says the stores are open for now, but it will be winding down operations and closing all 650 locations. The chain has 6,800 employees. The business launched in 1962 in Connecticut, providing clothing for working women. But sales declined last year at Dress Barn. Ascena also owns Ann Taylor, Loft, Lane Bryant, and other brands, but those stores will remain open.
And St. Louis's 2 major sports teams say they're prepared for severe weather that's expected to roll through tonight. Forecasters expect a thunderstorm to roll through downtown St. Louis at about the time the NHL's Blues played the San Jose Sharks in Game 6 of the Western Conference Finals. Baseball's Cardinals are opening a series with cross-state rival Kansas City.
Holy Spirit speaks to everybody. The problem is most folks don't listen.
Lonnie Poindexter.
If they do listen, they don't take it to heart or they get fearful or whatever. But when you listen and act upon it, wonderful things happen. And because a man of God heard the voice of God and acted upon it, it blesses me today. And you as well for listening in.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other congressional leaders are expected to meet with Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and the White House Chief of Staff on a resolution designed to prevent the debt limit from busting and reaching a broader budget deal. The 2 politically dicey issues may not ultimately be linked, but both are considered by top Democrats and Republicans to be high on the to-do list.
If you want to fight this guy, you have to know how to take him on. He's a bully. I understand him. I've watched him for decades. You can confront a bully. Don't let him get away with what he's doing. I think it takes someone tough to take on Donald Trump. I'm ready to go toe-to-toe.
Politics is a crazy world, but when you have the best employment numbers in history, when you have the best unemployment numbers in history, when you have the best economy probably that we've ever had, I don't know, how do you lose this election, right?
And now, Stacy Washington.
Oh, yeah. Hey there. Welcome back to the show. So glad to be with you, live and direct to you from St. Louis, Missouri, suburbs. And we're just killing it over here. Little update, little housekeeping update. I've crossed over to the other side yet again. Our son has graduated from high school, and yesterday was his graduation, or at least last evening, and we had a fantastic time with our family, and it was so wonderful. God really blessed us with the commencement ceremony was wonderful. The people, even the people we were seated around in the actual graduation ceremony, it was just a blessing. And I had family travel in, and they spent time with us over the weekend. And I tried like the Dickens to show them a little bit of St. Louis type fun. And we just had stuff closed on Monday. It was kind of crazy. It was like we're in a European country where they have Monday off because they worked on Saturday and Sunday. It was so silly, so silly. So our son was just, he's such a joy anyway, all the time. But he was such a fun part of this weekend, just celebrating him and celebrating his accomplishments and looking forward to what God is going to do in his life. So welcome to the program. Thanks for making your home here at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Stacy Washington, host of the program here. We are going to have really a wonderful show for you today. We're going to start off with, we're going to get into the encouragement here in just a minute. I'm going to explain President Trump's immigration plan. I got a little bit of feedback last week about having a guest on and talking about the immigration plan and talking about how great it was, but not really going into any detail. So I'm going to share that with you. And then we are also going to talk about the House Democrats accusing Dr. Ben Carson, who's the head of HUD, accusing him of throwing children on the street with the new immigration rule, which, again, this is all about your tax dollars and protecting them, which, by the way, also brings me to we are also going to discuss this Harvard-Harris poll of most Americans wildly underestimating the number of illegal aliens entering the United States. Senator Rand Paul has something called the penny plan. We're going to talk about that. The penny plan is his way of basically he takes what the piece of the budget that is represented by a penny. If you take all of the pieces of the federal budget and each piece is a penny, he says we can take 1% of each individual program, just 1%, reduce by 1%, and we could actually balance the budget in 5 years and stop borrowing $1 trillion a year. Because we take in about $4 trillion and we take in about $3 trillion, spend about $4 trillion. So that's a $1 trillion deficit every year. And he's this simple plan of getting rid of it. And I actually thought to myself when I was watching the video clip of this that we're going to listen to the audio of here in the program today, it occurred to me that if you can balance a federal budget with a $1 trillion deficit in 5 years by reducing 1% of your costs in each individual budget area, could you not apply that same plan to your own household budget, which is obviously it'd be easier. The numbers are on a scale that are easier to understand because it's your household budget. So you're dealing in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can look at it that way. I think it's worth exploring, especially if you're in a place where you have a goal and it feels out of reach and you feel like you can't get there monetarily. Maybe reducing expenses in certain areas of your household budget could help you get there faster. So that's an interesting take. We'll dig into that as well. Call lines are open. 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. So right now I want to get into, and of course, Kamala Harris. She has some garbage that she's been spewing as well. Today's show is titled Forget Game of Thrones, American Culture is Dying. So every show, every radio program, if you tried to get away from Game of Thrones this weekend, you couldn't, because if it wasn't the television barking at you, if you cut your TV off, you cut your radio off, which I actually did that this weekend. It was fantastic. If you did that, then it was the people, literally people coming up to you and talking about Game of Thrones. And I thought to myself, if this was like redeeming conversation, like if this show was something that spurred on anything of a redemptive nature, even if it had a value of entertainment that was decent, I could see getting this into it. But remember, I'm one of the Game of Thrones dropouts. After the Red Wedding, we were done. Me and my husband were watching it. We were finished, and we've never gone back. It's honestly, it was that grotesque. For people who are watching it, you have to make your own choices. You're responsible for your own choices and your own decisions. But I just feel like it's being forced on us. It's like people are like, if you're not enjoying it, we're going to make you listen to us talk about how we're enjoying it or not enjoying it, because apparently the season or series finale was just what people didn't want. Contrast that with how many people have come up to you over the weekend or in the past 7 days and said, I'm really concerned. Can we pray about this area of the culture? K through 12 public schools, universities, fascism, online censorship, out of wedlock births, poverty, despair, suicide, opioid epidemic, foreign debt, the spread of abortion by America through, USAID, in anything. How many people have approached you about that, and compare it to how many people are talking to you, talking your ear off, forcing you to be a part of this whole Game of Thrones experience? I had a lot more to say about that. I'm not going to get off into it at this very moment. I want to get to the encouragement. Today's verse for the encouragement is Galatians 6, 7 through 10. And I often hear people refer to this verse. What they'll do is they'll start at number 9, and they'll say, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially those who belong to the family of believers. I love that verse. That's fantastic. But I like to go back to verse 7, where he says, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. Some versions say God is not mocked. This one says God cannot be mocked. This is a New International Version. So in other words, there's no way you're pulling the wool over God's eyes. There's no way you're deceiving him. You may yourself be deceived, but he is not. He is not mocked. He cannot be mocked. And by mocked, we're talking about this idea that we can deceive someone or make them think one thing while we're doing another thing. Any of that duplicity. It says, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Whoever sows to please their flesh, from the flesh will reap destruction. Whoever sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially those who belong to the family of believers. And so my encouragement for you today is don't give up. Don't give up, and you must actually commit yourself to persisting in doing what is right and good. So we start out, obviously, when you're a new Christian, you're just like, you are on fire and you want to do everything and anything you can to spread the gospel, share with other people what you've experienced, and grow. But then, over time, the enthusiasm mellows and we become convinced that perhaps, it's not going to be as easy or as fun as we thought. And the enemy comes in, he's trying to steal what you have. He's trying to steal what God has given to you. Sometimes it's because of a discouragement or a prayer that we don't feel has been answered in the way that we would hope that it would. And as a young Christian, we don't yet fully comprehend that a no from God really means no, not that, because I have something better for you, something that it's wholly and completely more perfect for you than that. And so then from there, the enthusiasm, it might be mellowed, but it might actually get to a place where you become a bit stagnant and you can't move on. It gets a little bit like, a bit of a drudgery to go to church, and you start to notice the things about church that you don't love. Maybe the music isn't your favorite, or maybe, you don't like the fill-in pastor, whatever. At that point, that is when the enemy is most ripe to come in and convince you that maybe this whole Christian thing just isn't what it was sold to you, isn't what it was cracked up to be. Maybe you should just go back to, before. Can't be real. You're not getting the things that you've prayed for. But we have to keep on doing what is right and good, gathering together with the saints, studying our Bible, participating in Bible study, telling other people about what we know to be true, that the salvation that we receive from Jesus Christ and life with the Father is worth every minute, and that he is continually working all things out for our good, et cetera, so on and so on. So why do we have to keep doing what is right and good? Well, first of all, God can't be fooled. He knows what's going on. he knows that we're struggling with, the continuation, the walking forward in faith, the sanctification. He knows when we're sorrowful or feeling low because we didn't get that prayer answer that we thought. And he's working out for our good, but faith means we have to know that and not become discouraged when we don't have our prayers answered. It's not that you're saying, I see that no, but I'm going to raise you a yes, and I'm not giving up on that. It's that you know that you're praying something that isn't God's will for you. You're not seeing it just yet, but that you will see it, that you have to keep on holding on to that. So you can't say to yourself, well, I don't really feel it. And I've heard it before. I do believe it. You act like it is so until it is so. If it isn't so right now, you just act like it is so. You have to basically, it's putting one foot in front of the other. But God knows our feelings. He knows when we're walking it out and we're working our hardest at it. And he knows when we're phoning it in. He knows when we're, I'm sick. I'm not going to church today. Or I don't have time to look up for a Bible study. I have too many, I have 4 years of Game of Thrones to watch. I'm not going to, that he knows that. It's not like he doesn't see that. He's not aware that that's going on. Maybe saying, yeah, I'm a Christian, but not only do you curse like, a sailor, but you also post it on social media so other people see you with your little fish sticker or your, pro-life thing. And it's, you're claiming Christianity, but then every other post is full of profanity or, risque photos or what have you. Saying that Jesus Christ is Lord and saying that you belong to him, but not doing what he says, that's the part of God is not mocked. He cannot be mocked. That's what that verse is referring to. So you can get fooled. You can make a fool of yourself. You can convince yourself that you're a faithful Christian when you're not. And the scripture for that, James 1:26 says, if anyone considers himself religious and yet does not keep a tight rein on his tongue, he deceives himself and his religion is worthless. So you can deceive yourself, but you can't deceive God. So yes, we know that God is omniscient. He's omnipresent. He knows everything that's going on. He knows everything that's going to happen. He remembers everything that has happened. He transcends time. He is in all. He is all. He created all. We know that. But in our earthly existence, we tend to wall him off. And, we're like, well, he knows about this, but he doesn't know about that. Or I'll deal with this, whenever, because I can't deal with this right now. God knows about all of it. And God is rewarding every bit of it. That's why the Bible verse that says your work is not wasted is such a comfort. If you're working super hard and you don't feel like your boss sees it or your spouse or your children or whoever, God sees it and he rewards diligent work. He rewards it. And sometimes it's right then, sometimes it's later, sometimes it's an explosion, sometimes it's a just a low river of provision. Whatever it is, you have to know that God is rewarding you for that, and he will reward you for your hard work. And that's what can spur us on to have faith to keep working. So you do reap what you sow. The example, one of my favorites, because my grandparents on my mom's side were farmers, and they had a farm with a lot of acres, and they had animals and everything. And one of my favorite things about that analogy is when you plant corn, you get corn back. You don't plant corn and get tomatoes. So when you pursue sinful things, you get the fruit of sin, which is death. And when you pursue love and compassion, you receive love and compassion. So don't give up. Do not become weary in doing well. You will reap. Keep going.
Here's Walker Wildman for Redeem Clean Laundry Products.
Not only do you get a great product and you get to obviously clean your clothes, get the stains out and use a multi-surface cleaner to clean your countertops and use the dryer sheets. You're doing all of this and the money's going to support the work of American Family Association.
Redeem Clean Laundry Products were developed by AFA supporters Len Ingram and Jim Duncan to assist in funding the mission of the American Family Association. Redeem Clean products work as well as or better than other products on the market. They're environmentally safe, biodegradable, and they're made right here in the United States.
The great thing about Redeem Clean is not only is the product great, but it goes to support a great cause, and that is the work of American Family Association.
For clean laundry and a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Visit redeemclean.afastore.net.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. I have a very generous friend who has a particular burden for pastors and Christian workers who are discouraged and who are going through tough times. He and his wife have an area in their home where they invite people who are going through deep waters to retreat and be refreshed. When we're going through difficult times, we all need seasons of refreshment and renewal. 2 Samuel chapter 17, verses 27 through 29 is a powerful illustration of this principle. David and his men were running away from Jerusalem. He was running from his own son. Can you imagine the emotional stress and pressure David must have been under? Listen to 2 Samuel chapter 17, beginning at verse 27. Now when David had come to Mahanaim, Shobi, the son of Nahash, Machir, the son of Ammiel, and Barzillai, the Gileadite, brought beds, basins, pottery, wheat, barley, flour, parched grain, beans, lentils, parched seeds, honey, curd, sheep, and cheese of the herd for David and for the people who were with him to eat. For they said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. What a blessing to these fellows. What a blessing to David. We can learn some things from this. One, there are people who love you and want to care for you, so let them. Number two, stop and take a breather. Don't just keep putting the pedal to the metal. Pull over and take a breather. Then number three, face your difficulties with replenished supplies and not running on adrenaline and emotional fumes. Here's what I want you to remember today. You are loved and people care about you. Let them know what you're going through and then allow them to minister to you.
Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today. Congratulations to all of the 2019 graduates, whether it's college, university, technical school. If you happen to be graduating this year from your Air Force training, from tech school or from boot camp, or for any of the armed services. You know, I'm partial to the Air Force, but for many of the armed services, and also especially to those who are graduating from high school this year, may God's blessings be upon you and chase you down and overtake you as you go on to your next endeavor, whether it's technical school or work or training or, a year off. I know that's a thing. Or if you're going to college, God bless you. I'm excited for you, and I know God has wonderful things in store for you. And so it's my pleasure to welcome frequent guest of the program, Scott Whitlock. He's the associate editor for the Media Research Center's Newsbusters.org site. And he was a contributing editor and senior news analyst for Media Research Center. He's been published in the Washington Times, National Review, and other major news outlets. Scott, thank you for joining us again today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Hey, so let's talk about this. What is going on with this survey about Americans and immigration? And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, Scott, I'm discouraged because most Americans should know by now, with the president making this a signature issue and him talking about it constantly, and all the lawsuits and cases across the circuit appellate courts and all that. It seems like most Americans would be aware that we have a problem.
Well, you would think, but this is really where the impact of media bias, liberal media bias, shows, rears its ugly head, because it was actually a Harvard-Harris poll, and they found out that Americans dramatically underestimate the amount of illegal aliens coming in and the amount of illegal aliens being apprehended at the border, which is now, and it has been for month after month, over 100,000 apprehension. And so what we did was we actually went back and looked over the last 6 months, going back to January 1st, to see if the media has been covering that fact and covering the fact that we're over 100,000 apprehensions a month, and they haven't. It was only 9% of the coverage in that entire January to May span. So it shows that Americans don't fully know how bad it is, and I think it actually gets to another point in the conclusion of that Harvard-Harris poll where they found out when they told Americans just how many illegals were coming and the apprehensions, the support for building the wall and Donald Trump's emergency declaration jumped dramatically.
So, in the poll that you're talking about, for the listeners, if you're just tuning in, we're chatting with Scott Whitlock, associate editor over at Newsbusters, which is a part of Media Research Center. We always love when you guys come on and update us and give us the hard, cold, ugly truths, which this to me, when I saw this email, I immediately reached out to get you on because I'm kind of flabbergasted. I talk about immigration a lot on this show. The president, I feel like he's talked about it a lot. This is a Harvard-Harris poll. Shows a drastic underestimation about the number of illegal aliens who are entering the United States on a month-by-month basis. Specifically, this poll found that 87% of respondents guessed that the number of border apprehensions was much lower, 52% estimating that it was less than 100,000 per year. And we're talking about 100,000 per month. So I know why the news media would suppress it. I know why MSNBC, CNN, et cetera, would suppress this information. But why don't we have the president going on like a national media address to share this information? I mean, maybe someone at your place should send this over to him so he knows that, look, nobody knows what you're talking about. Because in order to get the kind of support that he needs to pass legislation or enact legislation that would stop this, you need to have Americans unified in opposing it.
Well, I think, this is the major problem with the liberal media, and I think this encompasses so many other parts of the Trump presidency. For instance, they always complain about why he uses Twitter so much, and I think obviously the reason is to go over the liberal media's head and talk directly to the American people in a way that he might not get otherwise, or that the media is, talk about things that the media that they aren't going to cover. And so he's certainly doing this because he's certainly mentioning the problem because he will constantly cite the statistic that we are at a 11-year high for border crossings. He's making that point, but you have to get it through the filter of the mainstream media. And you have a lot of Americans who don't necessarily pay attention, or they get their news through The Daily Show or some of the late-night liberal comedy shows, and obviously they're not going to give you the facts. So you can have even people who supported Trump in the 2016 election, but they're not paying attention to the day-to-day things, who aren't going to know this stuff. So this is the real-world impact of the liberal media, and they have made a difference. They have made a difference for Democrats for decades.
So The network journalists, according to your reporting, frequently downplay these numbers by comparing them to the record high rates back in 2000 and conclude that illegal immigration has decreased even though the current rate is the highest in 11 years. So clearly it's a problem. And I also saw, Scott, that news story, I believe it was Friday of last week, maybe, or late last week. You've got the governor of Florida, who is a Republican, and other leaders in the state apparatus and leaders of cities like Palm Beach and et cetera, saying that they were very upset with President Trump for planning to ship illegal aliens there. But and so they scrapped that plan and they're going to send them elsewhere. But how is it that we don't have the president saying, look, I don't have a choice. I have to put them somewhere. All of the border towns are full. I'm sending them to you, and then sending a press release to these local news outlets and saying, look, you're about to get 5,000 new illegal aliens, or you're about to get so many hundreds of them. You need to know why they're coming and why they're showing up. I believe the local news outlets, as liberal as they are, when it comes to actual local politics and local news, they tend to be much more moderate when it comes to things happening in their neighborhoods and their schools and their towns and their cities where their broadcast goes to. There is a solution to this. I know it doesn't go through Congress, but in taking in this information that you're reporting, I see some opportunities for the president to make a dent in this problem and to actually get through to some of the people who don't know the truth.
I think you're certainly right that a lot of the local news can certainly be much more reliable, certainly much more relevant to the people that they're dealing with in the ways that MSNBC, CNN, and the networks aren't. And I think that it's just a matter of getting through to people. And certainly I think that the president is trying. We saw that that he actually got through on media bias in the 2016 election. The question is, how do you keep doing it when you have all these different media outlets kind of in an onslaught against you? And then I think, furthermore, you have them contradicting themselves routinely, where one of the studies we did was during the lead up to the midterms, they kept telling us that the border wasn't a crisis, that it was a manufactured crisis. And then we have in the spring of this year, they started using the crisis term. They essentially admitted that the president was more or less right about this, but they want to argue about statistics from 2000 versus the last 11 years, and rather than get to the kind of the nitty gritty of what's actually happening at the border. So yeah, I think that is a reasonable point about local media, because they certainly, in my experience, will cover kind of things more on the ground than the mainstream media. But going around the media as he's trying to do, as he did successfully in 2016, is going to be key to getting this stuff done, to alerting people to what's going on, and obviously, if he wants to continue to get his agenda forward going forward into the next year.
I think the things that you're outlining here are they're valuable, and really, this is a conversation that has to be had not just here on American Family Association, American Family Radio, Urban Family Talk. And I know you guys do a lot of radio and media on the conservative side, and you guys reach out, and you're anywhere you can, your message can be heard. I know you guys do that at Newsbusters and Media Research Center. But I almost feel like there's a missing piece of this puzzle, and that is that, as you noted, and Scott, you and I think we've discussed this before, this amazing ability that the president has to reach voters through the rallies. He'll go to, Pennsylvania, and he'll say things, and the media doesn't want to report on it, but they have to, because he said this stuff. And, if he even adds in the slightest little joke, they have to cover that, and then the attending comment gets covered as well. These numbers have to be shared any place they can get shared. And I almost feel like it's like our duty, like yours and mine, and anybody who's listening, to leave a message for their congressperson, to speak to the next time their person's back in the district, whether it's your senator or your congressman. Tell them Americans don't know these numbers. It's time for you to start talking about them too. I think the GOP should engage in a messaging effort where they're talking about these numbers, not just on the echo chamber on Fox. Huge audience, lots of regular people watch it besides conservatives. But I'm talking about those people who are outside of that bubble. They don't watch Fox. They don't have cable. And they don't know this is going on.
Well, yeah, I think one way certainly to do that is social media, which gets back to one of the other issues we've been covering is social media censorship and attempts by Twitter and Facebook to censor conservatives. And we've been fighting that because that is the way that a lot of people are getting their news now. They're seeing things in their Facebook feeds, and we're very active over on Facebook and Twitter and all these other outlets. And so, if Americans aren't, less and less Americans are watching the mainstream media, then we have to get their news to them and facts to them through different outlets, and be that social media or, as you said, local news. That's really the way you have to do it. And I think, just to follow up real quick about your point about the president visiting areas, that definitely has an impact, because you're right, it is reported in local news, and we saw the impact of the fact that Hillary Clinton didn't go to places like Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and we saw what happened there, because just being there on the ground, you get a lot more coverage from local media, which can certainly be liberal and biased too, but they're covering things that are happening in and around the places that the people who watch their shows live, and so therefore you get more attention than you would otherwise by the mainstream national media.
Yeah, and that brings me to another question I'm dying to ask you. Okay, so Scott, let's okay, I'm just going to ask you. So Scott, because there's like a million candidates on the D side, and I think they're doing that because they want to replicate the same results they had that the Republicans had. The Republicans had a huge field. It was so big, the Democrats spent lots of time mocking it on their media outlets, But then in the end, what happened was President Trump rose to the top by vanquishing all of those candidates, even the it's your turn favorite, Jeb Bush. And that gave him more credibility with people on the right side of the political aisle. They were like, hey, he won this thing. He did this thing. Do you think the Democrats are trying to make that happen on their side by having so many people? Like de Blasio just announced. Who cares? But he's in.
Well, I think on an individual level, a lot of these Democratic presidential candidates have convinced themselves that if they can just get the nomination, they're de facto going to become president because they think that Trump is definitely going to lose. And I think that's kind of a misreading. We've seen again and again, nationally and internationally, how many times the polls have been wrong. But I think that they have bought into that. So you have so many people who kind of look themselves in a mirror and they see the next president. So that's where I think on an individual level that this is coming from. On a sort of a more corporate level, I think these Democrats think that they can just kind of winnow it down and that get it to certainly on the when you have like that kind of corporate establishment DNC types, they think that Joe Biden is the person who can win. And I'm not so sure about that because Biden has said gaffe after gaffe after gaffe, and conservatives and Republicans are certainly going to point out his all the issues and all the problems he has, and I don't think he's exactly going to have a free, easy ride once he gets the nomination, though the liberals and the media are going to try and help him.
But are you saying that because with Biden, as gaffe-prone as he is, I've seen the Democrats do this before. They did it. They've been doing it since Bill Clinton. They'll say, oh, yeah, he said that, but he's the best one to beat your guy. Or, yeah, he said that, but he's not a racist. Or, yeah, he sniffed those women, but he's not as bad as your guy. He said he could grab women. I mean, the justification and nullification of the wrongdoings, it seems like it's just rampant. Like it doesn't matter that he said these things, that he actually pulled out of a presidential race because of accusations of plagiarism and on and on. I mean, he's got a history full. He's like a basket of yummy campaign ads just waiting to happen.
Right. Yeah. Well, no, I think they're absolutely going to try that, but they did try that in 2004, where they thought John Kerry was he's a veteran and he's the best of the bunch and he's going to defeat George W. Bush, and that didn't really work out. Now, I'm not saying that Trump's going to be reelected, but I think that is the move of the establishment part of the party to kind of rally around Joe Biden, and they're certainly going to try and make it seem like his gaffes either don't matter or just ignore them. But we're living in a new era as far as social media, as far as how and where people are getting their news, and just the internet, talk radio, Fox News, the president himself. And I think that all these problems that Biden has, I don't think they're going to go away, and I don't think they're going to be able to, the Democrats are going to sweep them under the rug just because the liberal media wants them to. We just don't live in that era anymore where it's Walter Cronkite telling us that's the way it is.
Fantastic. Well, I hope you're right. I think you could be right. You guys are right a lot. Thank you so much, Scott Whitlock of Newsbusters.org, for joining us today. All right, we'll be back with more after this.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
It's amazing how God brings people into your life at just the right time.
When Tony was considering a studio analyst job with NBC Sports, he and I did what we always do when there's a big decision. We prayed about it. That year, Tony agreed to do the Super Bowl broadcast with NBC as an addition. He was hooked.
You know, I received a lot of instruction and encouragement from Sam Flood at NBC. Sam is one of the top producers in sports television, but he's also very much a family man. As God had done many times before, he put someone in my life who helped me grow.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
I would go to work drunk, and then it came to where I lost my housing. Being here at Teen Challenge taught me that I needed to have a relationship with God. I've done so much changing, and I am just so blessed.
If you or a loved one are struggling with addiction, Adult to Teen Challenge can help. There are centers across the country, and you can find the one nearest you at 855-END-ADDICTION or at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restraint. But blessed is he who keeps the law. Our country is suffering because of lack of leadership, division, and a disdain for godliness. Urban Family Talk exists to be a prophetic voice as we speak on matters of religion, family, and culture. We will not be silent on issues plaguing our communities today as we sound the alarm of truth, wisdom, and empowerment. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
This is Poll Paris with Fox News Director of Polling, Dana Blanton.
We have fresh 2020 numbers for you. First, Joe Biden is leaving everybody in the dust. Our Fox News poll finds he leads the race for the Democratic nomination with 35%. Bernie Sanders is a distant second at 17%. Next, Elizabeth Warren at 9%, Pete Buttigieg at 6%, and Kamala Harris at 5%. Support is up for Biden, Warren, and Buttigieg since March. Sanders and Harris lost ground. Currently, those are the top 5 candidates nationally. There were 22 announced major candidates when we started the survey. 2 more jumped in since. The number one thing to Democratic voters is beating Donald Trump. 73% say that's extremely important. Right now, Biden looks to be in the best position to do that. He's up over Donald Trump by 11 points in a head-to-head matchup. That's a significant advantage. Sanders tops Trump by 5 and Warren edges him by 2. I'm Dana Blanton, and that's your Poll Paris.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Tuition or food? How the rising cost of college is actually forcing some students to make hard choices. And what, if anything, can be done about it?
There's a troubling trend developing. A new study shows tens of thousands of college students cannot afford basic needs, even things like food and rent.
It's much more prevalent than you might think. The strong U.S. economy is a complete myth to many American college students. Temple University just surveyed over 100 institutions nationwide. And get this, around half of the students who responded said recently they literally could not afford meals or housing. Almost 20% had been homeless in the last year.
Wow. They make it sound as if going to college is just such a dire prospect. Right now in America, you can literally borrow any amount of money that you want because the federal government permits you to borrow money. They're in charge of the student loans. And so you can borrow your room and your board, which means you're eating on campus. But it's kind of hard to figure out why people are saying they're full-time college students and they're not living on campus when you can borrow the money to do it. So if you're having trouble figuring out how you're going to eat, then you can still go to college and you can work a part-time job to make sure that you have food. If you're a freshman or a sophomore on a college campus in America today, room and board is mandatory to prevent these types of things from happening. So that tells me these stories are really more about making sure that we feel terrible about these horrible plights of people that they can't be touched by the Trump economy because they're in college. Well, guess what? You can be touched by the Trump economy in college because guess what you can do? You can drive Uber. You can do Instacart delivery service in your spare time. When you're not studying, you can, and so you don't have a vehicle, then you can sell stuff on eBay. Don't have a vehicle. If you're at the poverty line and you're in college, then that means you qualify for work study. These stories don't hold up. We're talking about lying here. We're talking about open lying, lying about what's happening to these college students instead of just admitting that some people, obviously going to college is expensive. It's a struggle. It can be very hard. But to say that people are starving to death while they're attending college full time, just don't take it all at face value. They're not always telling the truth. So anyway, don't forget to head over to Stacy on the Right. Also teespring.com. So you can buy a t-shirt. You can buy a Stacy on the Right show mug. You can buy an iPhone or Samsung phone cover or a hoodie. There's other stuff up there too. Just go to teespring.org. I think I nicknamed it Stacy in the Warehouse. I can't remember, but it's on there. You can check it out. It's also pinned to the top of the Facebook page if you want to click through from there and buy some merch. The call lines are open. Let's go to the phones. If you want to call in, it's 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Tom in Arkansas, thank you for calling the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Just fine. Hey, I heard you a few days ago talking about our Second Amendment rights with carrying an arm, carrying a gun and what have you, and having this right. And, back when Donald Trump first made the statement to declare a national emergency on our borders a month or two ago, right after that, I've seen two different times, Fox News, that Nancy Pelosi got on there and said, remember, Mr. President, there'll be a Democratic president in there someday, and when there is, we'll declare a national emergency on the American people's guns, and we will take them up. And I'm just kind of curious, how come we don't hear more of that on the news? And if you could find this, blast this thing all over the radio.
What she said about the national emergency for the Democrats?
Yeah, they would declare a national emergency
yeah.
to confiscate the people's guns.
Yeah, she said that. So I have a couple things on that, Tom. And it's a great thing to point out that she said that, but she's not the only one who said it. Kamala Harris said, we'll do a national emergency on, she said guns. And she also said, this is so funny, she said that they would also do it on climate change. So they've all made these threats. Now, here's the truth of the matter. The president actually has control over immigration because that authority was ceded to him by Congress. Congress voted to give the executive the power over immigration. So executive orders on immigration are not just effective, but they're not outside of the Constitution. Now, an executive order on the Second Amendment and its purview has not been given over for interpretation to the executive. So any executive order that had to do with gun confiscation would immediately be, lawsuits would be brought. Probably the NRA would bring the lawsuit. And then that lawsuit would be ruled upon and appealed, and it would go to the Supreme Court. During that time, most judges, most sheriffs, and anywhere would put an injunction on gun confiscation. And here's the truth, Tom. Democrats own guns too. Democrats believe in the Second Amendment too. So you're talking about an issue that Congress can't ever get done because there are enough Democrats owning guns in America that Democrats get voted out of office if they're too far to the left on gun control. So they can talk about it all they want. They can make threats all they want, but they can't execute on it because, it's my friend over at National Review, Charles C.W. Cook, has written the best piece on it ever. And I'll dig it up and I'll post it on the Facebook page so you can take a look. In it, he describes what it really looks like to confiscate guns in America. First of all, there's the 80-10-10 rule. You've got 80% of Americans who they need facts and information to make up their mind. You have 10% of Americans who they're a no matter what you say. If you say, I'm going to give you some ice cream, they're like, nope, I don't want any of your ice cream. I don't know where your hands have been. I don't know if you got a clean ice cream shop. No. And then you have 10% of Americans who are pretty much like, yeah, yeehaw, let's do it. Whatever you say, let's try that new thing. Let's do it. So he says in his scenario, which is supported by statistics, that you'd have 10% of the people who would turn in their guns immediately because they're a part of that. Okay, you said I have to do it. I'll do it. You have 80% of the people who would try to decide based on information when they say I have to turn in my guns, what exactly do they mean? Now, the majority of gun-owning Americans, the numbers are like 80-10 on regular issues. But when it comes to the gun issue, it's more like 5-80, and then the rest. Now, and why is that way? 5% of the gun owners would probably give up their guns. About 80% of the gun owners would say, if you want it, you'll have to come over here and get it. So first, the Democrats would have to launch a public information campaign, and they'd have to campaign for gun control and gun confiscation by taking this information on the road and going from state to state, city to city, county to county, door to door, trying to convince Americans that this is a good, viable issue. Then after that, if they were in control of the presidency and Congress and they went up against this thing and the Supreme Court failed to, codify gun rights, then they'd have to mobilize the National Guard and bring home troops from around the world to have those troops and National Guardsmen go door to door and actually take guns from Americans. Now, there's no operable number of how many troops who are on active duty and how many guards members, our reserve troops and all of that would actually participate in something like that. Or how many of them would say, for the first time in my life, I choose to disobey an order given to me. And then there's, and of course, the police forces would have to be, and it's the same thing. Police officers are the ones who, by and large, if you go to get a concealed carry class, the person who's teaching you is probably in law enforcement or former law enforcement, former military. So they're training Americans on how to safely own firearms and conceal them and carry them and defend themselves and others. And these are the same people you think are going to knock down doors and demand guns from law-abiding citizens who've never broken the law. And then there's what happens when they start the actual confiscation. In our minds, we're giving a lot of leeway to these Democrats. They've campaigned. They've gotten the American people on board enough so that they're not being voted out of office. They now go door to door with American troops. These American troops would literally sometimes be stationed in their own hometowns and neighborhoods or states where they came from, graduated from high school from, whatever, knocking on doors, demanding that people turn over their guns. And the last part of this problem that it really makes all of this so untenable is that we don't have a formal gun registry. So they know everyone who has a concealed carry permit. We have information on that. But they don't know when they come to your door how many guns you have. So we're not talking about knocking on the door and getting the guns at the door. We're talking about no-knock raids and knock raids. We're talking about SWAT team operations starting in the inner cities and radiating out to the suburbs. And the assumption is that no lawful gun owner would say at the door, get off my property, you can't have my guns, and then execute whatever they feel is necessary justice on the person trying to confiscate because of the Castle Doctrine. So the question is, do Democrats believe that Americans would shoot other Americans, kill them, confiscate guns, whatever, take their children from them, put Americans in jail, arrest them at work? We're talking about this third world tin pot dictatorship, communist type regime where people are being hauled off in cattle cars to, their deaths, presumably, or at least imprisonment over gun ownership rights. We're also talking about not just the lawful gun market, but the unlawful gun market. We know there are 400 to 600 million lawfully owned firearms. We don't know how many unlawfully owned firearms there are. So the idea that they talk this big smack-filled game, they're just all about it on the, CNN when they got a microphone in their face or when they have a camera pointed at them, they're all big and bad about it. But when people say Molon Labe, and I may be mispronouncing that. The issue here is not my Latin proficiency. The issue is come and take them is the literal attitude of gun owners, because in order to take guns, you need guns, tanks, armored vehicles, and people who are willing to take the guns, take them at the door, take them in the backyard, take them in the grocery store, at the gas station, take them at the businesses, figure out how many there are, and keep taking them in the face of resistance, armed, trained resistance. It doesn't happen unless they're able to completely change the American psyche. And Democrats aren't even working on that. They're too busy worried about how many times I've said that there are only two genders so that they can shut down, this account or that account or other people who have way bigger social media followings than myself, shutting their algorithm, their stuff down by algorithm. That's what they're concerned with. I just don't see it happening. All right, let's go to the phones again. Awesome question. Daryl in South Carolina. Hey, thanks for calling the show today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I've been listening for a little while. Anyway, I'm a Navy veteran. I agree with what you said about the college students. They can work. I own a business. I just got my master's degree a few years ago at age 64. And
Nice.
I have a 21-year-old who's getting ready to go to college. They can go to junior colleges. They can also go to technical colleges where they get refunds and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But I also am able to employ young people that are in college with my cleaning business. So there's a lot I want to say, but I'm running out of time, and so are you. But I really appreciate you. I'm a person with a permanent tan who's
Yes.
very conservative, and there's a lot of us out here. So thank God for you, because you just don't know how depressed I get. Sometimes I can't just talk to anybody about my views, but I'm getting bolder.
Hey, thank you for that. So, Daryl, be encouraged. Thank you for sharing that. And I know how it feels. We actually had one of our kids talking about that. You never know who's a liberal or who's a conservative. And so you don't want to get out there and put yourself too far out and, make enemies. But it is nice to hear like-minded views and to know that it's not about our permanent tan. The views that we hold, it's about the truth, and it's about adhering to the Christian worldview. And so congratulations on going back to school and getting that advanced education. That is fantastic. Congrats on that. And for hiring college students. Thank you for being a part of the economy that helps drive our GDP and helps us to be able to do all that we can do here in our country. We'll just take Dave in Ohio. Dave, you have about 40 seconds. What's your comment?
Stacy, I just wanted to say I appreciate your radio program I listen to every day, and I agree 100% on the college situation.
Yeah.
I worked myself through college 40 hours a week. I have 3 kids that worked themselves through college. They all have 2 lawyers and an engineer.
Wow.
And their goal was to graduate debt-free, and they did it because they worked. And I think too many parents do a disservice to their kids by not giving them a good work ethic as they're training them to grow up.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you for that comment. And you are pithy. Good radio caller. Thanks for calling and sharing that. So what he's saying, I want to echo it. And I want to say, if you approach college, start talking to your kids about it. As soon as they get into high school, start talking to them about the cost of college. And when you visit colleges, make sure and take that information about, here's how much the tuition is, right? Here's how much the room and board is. Now, here's how much we as your parents are going to contribute to your college education on a yearly basis, whether that's what you're working to pay outright or you've saved it or you've invested it, whatever it is. There's no shame in your game. You've raised the kids. Their education is a privilege. You contribute to it, but it's their responsibility too. And then you take your Excel spreadsheet and you put all those numbers in for every single college that you visited or every single college they're considering. And you say, now here's what you got to get: scholarships, merit scholarships, your part-time job. Here's the number we're contributing. Here's what you have to come up with on a yearly basis. And you can borrow that, although we believe in debt-free college. Start talking to your kids about that early and let them know what their options are. There's so many ways to get college paid for so you don't have to have student loans. That's America for you. And of course, the provision of the Almighty. He'll get it done for you if you purpose it in your heart. If you're leaving us now, God bless you from the heartland. One News Now, news and information coming up next, onenewsnow.com.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
You only want to donate to biblically sound organizations. So as a federal or state employee, why not choose the American Family Association Combined Federal Campaign Designation 12037? Of the organizations on the CFC list, AFA is one of the few standing for you and your family. By choosing 12037, you help make it possible for us to continue.
Truth. Wisdom. Empowerment. Urban Family Talk. A ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. The Save Chick-fil-A bill has been approved by the Texas legislature. Governor Greg Abbott has to sign off on the measure, but it appears that he will sign the legislation. Supporters say it will prevent a government from punishing individuals or businesses based on their membership in, affiliation with, or contribution to a religious organization. It's called the Save Chick-fil-A bill because the San Antonio City Council recently pulled a contract with Chick-fil-A to open a location inside the San Antonio City Airport. Some city councilors took exception to Chick-fil-A's financial contributions to groups including the Salvation Army and Fellowship of Christian Athletes, which the city councilors say have an anti-LGBTQ record. Chick-fil-A already operates many locations in the San Antonio area. Starbucks says a pair of lawsuits alleging possible customer exposure to dangerous chemicals like merit. More on that from Fox's Gernal Scott.
One suit claims some New York stores used a pesticide, dichlorvos, contained in a brand of bug-killing strip, and that the chemical is unsafe for people and should not be used around food. The second suit, filed by an ex-employee, claims complaints about toxic chemicals used in stores got him fired. Starbucks commented, saying while they do not take action against workers who express concerns, they believe both lawsuits are attempts to stoke public fear for financial gain. The spokesperson said customers are not at risk and the products in question have been removed from stores.
President Trump's former White House counsel was a no-show at the House Judiciary Committee today. Rachel Sutherland reports from Washington.
The committee adjourned after about 20 minutes as its VIP guest, former White House counsel Don McGahn, defied a subpoena. Democratic Chairman Jerry Nadler threatened to hold McGahn in contempt.
This committee will hear Mr. McGahn's testimony, even if we have to go to court to secure it.
Ranking member Republican Doug Collins blasted Chairman Nadler for issuing a subpoena before inviting him voluntarily.
Well, the majority loves the chance to rant against the administration. I just am glad today to see that we don't have chicken on the dais.
Collins referring to Democratic committee member Steve Cohen, who brought a bucket of chicken to a hearing where Attorney General William Barr was a no-show.
A rare training exercise between two large U.S. warships took place in the northern Arabian Sea as tensions continue to increase with Iran. Lucas Tomlinson has more from the Pentagon.
The U.S. Navy says the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln steamed alongside the amphibious assault ship Kearsarge in international waters hundreds of miles from Iran. One of the few times Marine Corps Harrier jets have trained alongside Navy's Super Hornet jets. Navy Lieutenant Commander Mike Scott, one of the Super Hornet pilots aboard Lincoln, said it's rare to have Harriers take gas from a Super Hornet. American officials say steaming two large warships together is meant to send a strong message to Iran, not start a war. At the Pentagon, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
And in an effort to bolster transsexual ideology, at least two schools in Australia have done away with the traditional Mother's and Father's Day celebrations. Here's AFN's Bob Kellogg.
TheDailyWire.com reports Brunswick East Primary School in Melbourne has replaced both days with two acknowledgement days. Principal Janet DePilla wants to make these occasions as inclusive as possible. Cultural issues writer Laura Higgins of the Illinois Family Institute says this is a preposterous policy.
They said they no longer subscribe to a binary world. This is such a manifestly stupid statement. The thought that this would come out of the mouth of an educator is astonishing.
The Daily Wire also reports the Des Moines Child Care Center is replacing Mother's and Father's Day with Family and Friends Day. Higgins says most children are not that gullible.
Children know that humans have mothers and fathers, and even children who are raised in homosexual homes, many of those children long for the parent of the gender they're missing.
Even though it may be difficult, she urges parents to pull their children out of any school that incorporates this leftist ideology.
Stand by.
The B-Sack Radio Show spotlights Christian rap artists.
But never try to put me on the pedestal. The Lord is working on me. I'm getting better still.
Hear in-depth interviews and news about upcoming releases.
What's your motivation? Jesus, he's a motivation.
B-Sack is the Biblically Sound Artist Coalition. Don't miss the B-Sack Radio Show. Saturdays from 10 a.m. to noon Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other congressional leaders are expected to meet with Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and the White House Chief of Staff on a resolution designed to prevent the debt limit from busting and reaching a broader budget deal. The two politically dicey issues may not ultimately be linked, but both are considered by top Democrats and Republicans to be high on the to-do list.
If you want to fight this guy, you have to know how to take him on. He's a bully. I understand him. I've watched him for decades. You confront a bully. Don't let him get away with what he's doing. I think it takes someone tough to take on Donald Trump. I'm ready to go toe-to-toe.
Politics is a crazy world, but when you have the best employment numbers in history, when you have the best unemployment numbers in history, when you have the best economy probably that we've ever had, I don't know, how do you lose this election, right?
And now, Stacy Washington.
Ooh, I'm back, and it's so good to be with you. I have to say congratulations again. If you're just tuning into the show, welcome. Congratulations to the graduates of 2019. High schoolers, college students, graduate students, technical school students, tech college students, people who are graduating with certificates of training, whatever you've been working on. If this is your graduation season, congratulations to you. Thank you for tuning into the show today and making your home at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. And we have another fantastic show for you. This hour, we're going to be chatting with Matthew Bunson from the National Catholic Register. He's coming on to discuss the Alabama pro-life bill. Now, no, I'm not gonna like do a spoiler alert for tomorrow's show, but suffice it to say, some weird announcements have been being made by so-called Republicans who don't support these pro-life legislation pieces. And the reasons that they're giving sound a lot like what the liberals say. Yeah, that's what's happening. So we'll dig into that. We're going to talk about the debt problem. We're going to talk about a former abortion clinic owner describing how sex education in public schools actually creates a market for abortion. This is something that if you're a parent of kids, you got to know this information because it enables you to be able to counter that message from your kid's school. But the fact is, and now I'm in experience land here when I say this. I honestly, the difference between public school and Christian school, it becomes more evident over time. I mean, it's obvious in the beginning when you go tour the Christian school, the difference, but over time, you see it in your children. Now, if you're one of those families, you're saying, you know what, Christian school is not for us because of the cost, or we don't have anything in our area that we feel is appropriate and what have you, you get the same impact by homeschooling. And if you're not able to do all of the homeschooling yourself, if it's not something you feel like you can take on as the primary, driver, then you should check out co-ops in your area. See if there are any co-ops. And a co-op is a group of parents who've gotten together and they've said, we're going to hire some teachers. So they're basically setting up their own school. It's a homeschool environment. So the teachers will teach your child. They'll instruct them. They'll give them grades. And there's a fee associated with it. Like usually you pay a fee to join the co-op and then you register for the classes. It's almost like a college situation where you register your child for maybe 3 or 4 classes from the co-op, the tougher classes, maybe, the math and the sciences, or maybe math, science, and history, whatever you want that they're offering. You register your child for that. Your child shows up there and gets taught, but it leaves out all the guff. There's no character education. There's no computer lab, unless that's a class your kid's taking, and it's never a computer lab. It's something specific that they're learning and getting a certificate in something from Microsoft Office or Access databases or Excel spreadsheets or PowerPoint or, some other, operating system, whatever. These co-ops serve as a way to give you the access to the teaching staff, the teachers, the resources, and then you supplement that. Maybe you're in charge of the art and, PE and music. And those are the instructional areas that you're in charge of. And you get yourself a music teacher who's teaching your child maybe voice and maybe piano or flute or what have you. And those are easy to find too. So is it more legwork? Yes. But are your kids worth it? Yes. So we're going to dig into that. In fact, let's do it now. I already told you who the guest is for this hour in the program. So this is a former abortion clinic owner. She pushes sex ed on kids. She said when she worked at the abortion clinic, they partnered with schools to use sex education to kind of put it in the kids' mind that your parents don't want you to know this, and your parents don't want you to have sex, but sex is fun and it's easy and it's cool and you should do it. And if you get in trouble, you can always come to us, Planned Parenthood, and we'll help you. Creating future clients for the abortion clinic. Now, this is reported by the Catholic Register. The lady's name is Carol Everett, and for 6 years, she operated 4 abortion clinics in Texas. She earned a commission for every abortion that was executed. She also was entitled to a share of the fees that were charged by each clinic. She sold abortion and made big bucks off of the cash cow that it was. So she said, and this is at the annual Rose Dinner for the National March for Life in Ottawa. She says a new abortion clinic would pay for itself by doing abortions. 1 month was all it took to completely pay off the cost of that clinic. And the clinic system to make all of this quick, easy money was simple and easy. The abortionist would move from one room to the next, performing abortion after abortion, often without even cleaning up between. In addition, the counselors at the clinics are more like telemarketers. They're trained to schedule abortions. They're not there to help you make a decision or to help you kind of flush out the issues. They're there to help you have an abortion. Period, point blank, get it done. Okay, thank you. They're also there to eliminate the potential client's fears and objections concerning the procedure. Now, Everett left the abortion industry after a Christian business counselor that she hired led her to Christ. She also talked about how damaging government-funded sex education programs are. In her speech at the Rose Dinner, she took aim at the programs for stealing away the innate modesty of children and creating a rift between parents and their kids. And this is, again, you know why I'm so passionate about this? Because I see some of the families, they're just like, obviously they're people. They put their pants on one leg at a time. Their kids have problems and they have problems. But there's a love and a camaraderie and a respect from the children to the parents that is so obvious and so evident. And it comes from those kids knowing Jesus Christ. Because our natural inclination as people is to shake our fist at God and at any authority and say, not just I'm going to do it my way, but I'm going to do it my way and I don't want you telling me anything about it. That's who we are. That's our sick and depraved condition. We're sinners. But when children come to know the Lord and they memorize scripture and they have no place of escape, meaning they don't go to school and have the teacher tell them, well, your parents are Christians, but you don't have to be. That sows dissension, and that deception seeps into kids. It takes away their natural curiosity. It replaces their soft, pliable, teachable natures with rebellion, and it puts the parents on the back. You're back on your heels. You're on defense. And if there's anything you don't want to be on defense on, it's parenting. We're talking about human beings created in the image of God who are given to you for a time so that you can raise them to know him and love him. And then they're really not yours anymore. And it's so hard to get to that because you're loving your children, you're raising them, you're doing all that you can for them. And the enemy is out. What's he out there for? To kill, steal, and destroy. And that is primarily for the kids. What do you think the enemy wants to do? He doesn't want you and your children to have a close personal relationship and for them to respect you and love you and see Christ's love for them modeled in you. The devil doesn't want you and your kids to be united in prayer over issues at their school or in their friend group. He doesn't want your family united in prayer, interceding on behalf of your school, church, city, nation. No. So he's there, and this sex education, it's on autopilot. So she was talking at this Rose Dinner, and if you're just tuning in, I'm talking about Carol Everett. She was formerly a clinic director over 4 abortion clinics in Texas, and now she's a pro-life speaker. A counselor led her to know the Lord and brought her out of the abortion industry. And so she's speaking at this Rose Dinner, and she says, the programs, the sex ed programs, aim to teach children that talking to their parents about sex is uncomfortable. And the people that they could talk about it more comfortably with are Planned Parenthood workers or their school counselor or someone at the school, not their parents. And the fact is, if you have a good relationship with your kids and you've been talking to them about the proper names of the human body parts and really destigmatizing something that the world wants to stigmatize it. The world wants sex to be something dirty that can't be discussed. But if you treat it as something that is a function of a healthy marriage that God ordained for men and women to enjoy with each other within the confines of marriage, and you use the proper names, the anatomical names for body parts, and you engage your children on this issue, they not only will not be afraid to talk to you about it, you'll be shocked at the stuff they'll ask you. They will come to you because they know, well, I can ask my friends and they don't know anything. They don't know anything true about, human sexuality compared to potatoes. They don't know anything about it because they keep using the wrong names for the body parts. But I know if I ask my mom, she'll tell me. I know if I want to know something, I'll go ask my dad. I can bring it up after dinner at the table with my siblings sitting around. I can ask. If your kids have that, then keep that information flowing within the confines of your home so that the enemy can't come in and fill them up with this sex ed nonsense. And so you must glean from what I'm saying, haters in the audience. God bless you. Thanks for listening. That I am not trying to keep information from the kids, nor am I trying to stigmatize sex, nor am I afraid of it or children or Planned Parenthood or sex ed. I don't think strangers should be teaching your kids about sex. You should teach them about it. Biblical sexual relations in the confines of marriage, taught by the parents to the kids as this is what the Bible ordains for us. The world wants you to think X, here's the truth. That's the bond that you can have with your children, that any subject can be discussed, whether it's drugs, alcohol, mistakes that people are making, depression, whatever. They can come and talk to you about it. And the funny thing about kids is we take for granted that they have eyes and ears of their own and they can observe, and that God has given them an innate sense of childlike wisdom. They see things often more as they truly are than we do. So she says the programs want to teach children not to talk to their parents because if they do, they'll be uncomfortable. They offer to be the people that the kids can talk to. Then they provide the girls with low-dose birth control, which is ineffective. Because if you don't take low-dose birth control at the same time every single day, it doesn't work. And then when the girls get pregnant, because they've been told by their teacher at school that they're just animals, and if they want to do something, they should satisfy themselves. Don't worry about marriage. That's some old fogey stuff your parents want you to believe. You don't have to be religious if your parents are religious. That's what they call it, religion. So then the kids are then pregnant. The girls are pregnant and they're scared. They know they've gone against what their parents have told them to do. So they go and they have an abortion. So once Everett admitted to herself that she was a baby killing and woman killing woman, she noticed the harm that she and her abortion clinics were doing in order to get a quick buck. And for the very first time in her life, she took notice of the girls sitting in her clinics. They'd be in the corner crying. She said she saw her own abortion for what it was. For the first time in her life, she realized it was what drove her down the path of pain and denial that she had been on. And that's when she turned away from the industry and started a foundation to help women and girls facing crisis pregnancies and began speaking around the country. Everett credited the closing of 28 abortion clinics in Texas to God, and she believes this new legislation in Alabama will lead to more closings and more lives saved. That's powerful. When we get back, we'll have Matthew Bunson. I'm Stacy Washington.
Our Holy Land tour for March of 2020 is set. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. Last year, we sold out in August, and I expect us to do that again this year. There is such a high demand, especially among Christians in America, to see Israel, the land of the Bible. So we're going again in March on our annual trek. So I wanted to go ahead and let you know, if you want to sign up and register, get more information, whatever the case may be, if you want to go to our website, twholyland.com, twholyland.com, everything is there, twholyland.com. You can even print off a brochure from that website. It's going to be a wonderful time visiting Israel with brothers and sisters from across our country as we go to the Holy Land in March. So go ahead and get signed up now, twholyland.com.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
American credit card debt has now topped $1 trillion, and most of the people in debt don't pay off their credit cards and thus pay very high interest rates. But never fear. Socialists, Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have introduced legislation to provide some relief. Their bill would limit what credit card companies could charge in interest rates. Although the Bible and even various theologians have warned against usury, I don't think that is the origin of their concern for the Loan Shark Prevention Act. Instead, they merely think that government should be a solution to any social problems in society. Most Christians would instead suggest that providing biblical counseling on money would be a better solution. High interest rates are being charged by credit card companies, but also by payday lenders. In previous commentaries, I've talked about how some of these groups prey upon poor Americans who need to borrow money before their next paycheck. These interest rates being charged seem exorbitant until you realize that some of the people borrowing money have a poor track record in repaying the loan. By the way, these two socialists aren't through. They also want the U.S. Postal Service to provide basic banking services so that poor people don't have to pay banks a monthly service fee. This would be the same U.S. Postal Service that loses about $5 billion each year and lost a record $15 billion in 2012. Let's just say that the post office might not be the best model for sound financial management, and postal workers don't need to be given the responsibility of becoming bank tellers. These bills and proposals once again illustrate the mindset of some members of Congress who are convinced that the best solution to any social, political, or economic issue is more government. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back to the program. Thanks for being with us today. Find out more at afr.net, urbanfamilytalk.com, and stacyontheright.com. All right, so it's my pleasure to welcome Matthew Bunson to the program. He's with the National Catholic Register. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us today.
Oh, very good to be with you.
So this Alabama bill has really caused a furor across the country. I know for those of us who are pro-life, we're excited about what we're seeing. And I'm fine with the backlash. I'm fine with the attention that's being paid. I actually hope that more people are finding out the truth about the abortion industry because of the bills like the ones passed in Missouri. Ours is a lot weaker than the Alabama bill, but still, the Alabama bill is kind of the tip of the spear here.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. What we have seen, certainly in the last 2-3 years, is a movement on the part of the pro-abortion movement to try to cement or codify, and certainly in the state level, abortion laws. And that has had the interesting side effect of revealing very plainly what the true agenda is. The mask, in a way, has fallen off, that the end game for them is no longer even what it was in 1992 under Bill Clinton of abortion being safe, legal, and rare. It is now quite literally abortion on demand at any time, even up to what is tantamount to infanticide, as we saw in the New York bill and as was being proposed in the Virginia law. So the radical aspect of the abortion movement is now plain for everyone to see.
And I kind of thought it was radical 6 or 7 years ago when they had some of their pro-abortion protesters chanting "Hail Satan" in the Texas legislature. But it's that's crazy, but it's worse. Hard to say, but it seems worse now than ever.
Well, I agree. I mean, abortion itself is utterly radical. in what it does to culture, in what it does to the unborn, in what it does to those who participate in it and procure it. But what we're seeing now is all bets are off in terms of any willingness to compromise, any willingness to accept any sensible regulations or limitations. The movement now is going straight down the road to what they see as the federal payment, the federal covering and health care of abortion, so taxpayer-funded abortion on every level. And it is, as we were just saying, that abortion on demand up to and including birth. Those are their objectives, and it is helpful, I think, for clarifying where exactly we are today in the 21st century with regard to the abortion movement.
So what happens next? Because I think a lot of people are like, okay, that's a fantastic bill. It's not due to take effect for 6 more months, the Alabama bill. What happens? Well, right. I think the ACLU, somebody's already said they're going to sue about it, I'm sure. Is part of the intent to send it to the Supreme Court, or, you know?
Yes, I think we're seeing a twofold strategy. The first is we have some bills similar, like the Alabama bill, that is intended essentially to be a direct challenge to Roe v. Wade, to bring it to the Supreme Court as quickly as possible. We also have a host of other pieces of legislation in legislatures all across the country. We're seeing the heartbeat bills, we're seeing the dismemberment bills, we're seeing the requirement for regulations of abortion centers, of abortion clinics, abortion mills. That's another route of moving cases up to the court. So we're seeing, I think it's going to be a twofold track. At least this is what attorneys who follow this sort of thing are saying, certainly telling me, that the Alabama bill is virtually guaranteed to be challenged immediately and will likely be stricken by a federal court because of the ability to cherry pick where you're going to make your appeal. The other cases are likely also to be struck down by different courts, and then both sides are going to be working their way up through the appellate system. So we're looking at some years, I think, of appeals and then movement to higher courts.
So stricken down by a court is just code for liberal activist judge, says you're not allowed to do that. But the real rubber meeting the road is if they're going to have like injunctions saying we're striking this law down and we're also enjoining you from going forward with it, like doing any part of it while it works its way up. And of course, they always give notice right when they get the negative ruling. Well, we're appealing, so we're notifying you that we're going to appeal right there, then and there. So the judge knows, And the other part that's really funny about that is, Matthew, we're talking about people who are striking down laws that are enacted by legislatures, which means the people who enacted those laws could easily be recalled or replaced in the next election, and the law could be reversed. But instead of doing that, they're saying, no, we're going to just use the legislative or the judicial branch to nullify the legislative.
Right. Well, we've seen for a while the phenomenon of activist judges, of an activist judiciary, and the ability for different organizations, as long as they have proper legal standing in the eyes of the court, to file a suit and an injunction by very carefully cherry-picking the court to which they're going to make their appeal or to bring the suit. I think in particular of the Ninth Circuit Court, which is especially infamous for its left-leaning tendencies. There's been some controversy because President Trump has appointed, I think, several new members to the Ninth Circuit. It's not tipping the balance as yet, but for the first time in a while, I think we are hearing what one could call conservative judicial voices in courts that had not had that type of a voice for a while. So those activist judges then pose, I think, the most immediate threat to all of the abortion legislation that's been passed. And now the question is going to be, how far can they get in the appeal system? And I expect that these cases will find their way at some point to the court. Now, the question is going to be, will the court take the Alabama case, for example, on its own? Will it aggregate it? Will it put it together with all of the other abortion cases that are likely to find their way up there, including the heartbeat bills and the dismemberment bills? Or are those going to be treated separately? And if they're treated separately, then we're looking at a series of rulings over a period of time. And that, I think, will lay the groundwork for where we are and where we're going to be with abortion in America.
So do you see, because I know one of our daughters was like, we are the most pro-life generation, Mom. And I was like, I know. but that doesn't mean that the, pro-abortion grandparents and parents are going to still keep, basically beating that drum and slowing down the progress that's being made. Because these young people are the ones like Lila Rose and these are youthful people who are driving these debates and the conversation and the legislation, the protests, the prayer movements, the marches. They're the ones who are driving this. And when they're older, I would love for them to be able to have the kind of results we've seen in other areas of American society where they're able to say, yeah, that was the truth for us once. You know, how we speak about slavery. It was once true for us that people could own people, but no more. And we've come so far since then. I would love for them to be able to say, yeah, we were the most pro-life generation when I was in my youth, but now we're a pro-life country.
There was a striking comment from some feminist leaders at the March for Life. I don't know if you attend each year in Washington, D.C., and of course now we have the March for Life on both coasts. We've got marches all over the country, but the one in Washington, D.C., which tends to draw the largest crowds, some feminist leaders were making the admission that they were very disturbed because here they were on the metro in Washington, D.C., and I use the metro every day, and piling out of the cars to go to the march, holding signs, and in such joy-filled mood were literally hundreds of young people. And as they wandered through the city, they were stunned and dismayed to see how many young people were attending the March for Life. And they said that if you look at this, that the pro-life movement, it is a young movement. And they find that extremely alarming, as they should, because there is certainly a generational shift in some ways. Millennials understand. And there's, in a way, a practical aspect to it, that given the fact that we have seen tens of millions, of 60-some million abortions since Roe v. Wade, the path to birth in the United States, just as the path to birth in other places, especially in the West, is a precarious one. So this generation, certainly anyone born after 1973, is aware of the risks that they faced in utero when they were unborn, of just coming into the world. And I think that is one of those unspoken aspects of why the pro-life movement is gaining so much traction.
Yeah, it is. But I love that story. That is one of my favorites now that I've heard about people getting triggered because a bunch of happy, probably good-looking, well put together, casually dressed, not uptight young people, probably with Starbucks and, all kinds of Tiva mugs in their hands with their signs, are piling out, going to happily protest an issue that they're engaged on. That really, what they think the Republicans and the pro-life movement and conservatives are all about, they think it's about old white guys. And there are plenty of old white guys over here. That's great. But their party is the one running a bunch of old white guys for the presidency. Their party is a bunch of old white guys talking about what women should and shouldn't do with unborn babies, not their body parts, their babies. And in the videos we saw of Planned Parenthood talking about the sale of unborn, their aborted body parts of babies, there were some old white men in that too. So there's no problem with being old or white or a man. But the characterization of the pro-life movement as being run by a patriarchy, it's just not true, is it?
No, exactly. And one of there are two other things that we're seeing emerge out of this younger generation. The first is a proper understanding of the patriarchal, to use their language, aspects of abortion, certainly since the legalization of it from Roe v. Wade, that it has become a brutal instrument in the hands of many men to force women to end pregnancies, to have abortions because it's inconvenient for them. We see how many women are sort of bullied into abortions, which also raises the aspect that some are really beginning to talk about in the pro-life movement, and that is that this is the great human rights and civil rights fight of our time, that the unborn have civil and human rights that have to be protected. And when we have the realization that if a woman has control over her body, which is what the pro-abortion movement has always said, surely a child, an unborn child, an unborn woman should also have that right over their body. So there's the dichotomy and the discrepancies and the hypocrisy of the abortion movement is being laid bare more and more in the face of very clear, cogent arguments and reframing arguments that make sense, especially to young people in the area of rights and justice.
So I'm hoping that, obviously what you've shared today has been very encouraging, and I understand the way that the process works. The pro-abortion people always want to move conversations that Americans are having and movements that are happening in state legislatures where laws are being created. They always want to move those away from the people and their legislative bodies and shift them to the courts because they have control of the courts. But there's a phenomenon that's been going on that I've been watching with interest, and that is it's a single-minded push by Leader McConnell, and he's working in cohort with the president to get a lot of these really activist courts flipped back to a constitutional kind of orientation. And they've put in a record number of judges, and they're not stopping. Do you think that's going to be helpful in the future going forward as these cases wind their way through the courts?
I do. I think that has a twofold effect. The first is that we are seeing, as I was mentioning with the Ninth Circuit and other courts, down the court system. Everyone is very focused on the Supreme Court, but these appointments represent a real seismic shift on a lot of these courts in that where you have an already fairly conservative group or body that is now strengthened, but we're also hearing conservative voices on these other courts that have not had them for a long time. But this is also going to have an important impact down the road, and that is that given political cycles, we don't know if President Trump's going to be reelected, but down the road there's likely to be another Republican president, win or lose on the part of President Trump in 2020. And you are looking now at a pool of what will then be seasoned, experienced, talented judges who know the system and who are then going to be real possible picks, candidates for higher positions in the courts, up to and including the Supreme Court. In much the same way that you need to have young legislators on the state level who become candidates for higher office, you need to have a deep bench and a deep pool. In that same way, too, a transformation of the judiciary is happening before our eyes. And I can guarantee you, as somebody who works in Washington, D.C. and covers politics every day, this is one of the most alarming aspects to this administration when you talk to Democratic lawmakers.
I think it's the best. Honestly, I get stressed because I think it's one thing when you win on the merits. So if you say, I don't like this new law that's been passed, it's unconstitutional, and so you sue and you take it to the judiciary. And the judiciary looks at the precedent and the Constitution and says that's unconstitutional. That's one thing. But what the Democrats are doing is getting injunctions to stop the people of America from being able to simply have their legislators pass laws. And I'm so glad it's alarming to Democrats. It should be a wake-up call for them. Matthew Bunson, National Catholic Register, thank you for coming on today. I hope to talk to you again soon.
Great to be with you. God bless.
All right. God bless. All right, when we get back, we'll take calls and we'll finish out the program today. I have so much more to get to. 866-963-2037. Be right back.
This is Life Issues with Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute. All across America, state legislatures have been debating born-alive bills, legislation that would protect newborn infants who survive a late-term abortion. In Wisconsin, Nancy Stencil, chair of the Democrat Party of Marathon County, opposes this law and said something that made me, well, angry. She said, "It's selfish to have a baby with disabilities live just for the sake of living." That's a lie. God has a plan for each baby conceived, and He loves them and doesn't want them to be killed by abortion. When people advocate abortion for the sake of compassion, call them out on it. There's nothing compassionate about intentionally killing a defenseless baby. We must boldly and with love stand up for those who cannot defend themselves. Always.
Like us on Facebook at Life Issues and stay informed, more informed than you've ever been.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, "The sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do." In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for His service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Fellow Americans and all of our friends, join me nightly right here on Urban Family Talk. The C.L. Bryant Show, 7 p.m. Central, as we build the bridge to conversation throughout our great nation, the greatest nation on the face of the planet, the greatest success story the world has ever known. That'll be America, 7 p.m. on Urban Family Talk.
It's The Candidates with Brett Baer.
Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell announced on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
I talk to kids who sit in their classroom afraid that they'll be the next victim of gun violence, and they see Washington doing nothing about it.
Focused on gun control. Amy Walter, national editor of the Cook Political Report.
During the Russia investigation, the Mueller investigation, Eric Swalwell was a fixture on cable television, sees that he can put his message, whether it's about Russia or about guns, at least into the dialogue.
And Britt Hume, Fox News senior political analyst.
He's a top-rung collusion truther. So he's out there where some people might think the buses don't run on a number of issues. You know, and if he gets publicity and attention, I think he probably calculates that he's ahead.
All right, the Swalwell will make it to Iowa.
Nope.
I wouldn't think so.
You can hear more of this series at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts. I'm Brett Baer.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
No, seriously. Listen, we need a mayor who is going to be on the job 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so I asked the question, has the crisis in affordable housing been addressed? No. Has income inequality been addressed? Equal pay for equal work. How about cyclists who unfortunately are dying on our streets as a result of crashes? Has that been addressed? Environmental issues, has that been addressed? So what is the legacy? What are you running on? Has school segregation been addressed? So all of these issues and more, obviously, listen, he could run. He's the 23rd candidate. I understand that. But the question is, why? ¿Por qué? Like, what's up?
So you.
But he's a friend.
Wow. So that's the Attorney General of New York trashing Bill de Blasio, asking why he's running. Now, I don't know what country she lives in. She says the schools are segregated, but the Democrats control New York. So if the schools are segregated and the Democrats are in charge, I got to ask her the same question. Why? ¿Por qué? Why are you voting for Democrats? They've segregated your schools. That's not the law of the land. Uh-oh. Yeah. When you get to dealing in too much common sense, you know what can happen. You know what can happen. I don't know where she is. Obviously she's physically located in New York. And okay, full disclosure. Yeah, she's talking about the big stories that kind of were roiling the news a couple of years ago. a bunch of parents got together with some school administrators and convinced them to basically eliminate the school districts as they were. And New Yorkers had carefully saved their money and, climbed up the property ladder to have ownership or renting arrangements in school districts that were AAA rated. And what they did was the school administrators were like, we're just going to bring in kids from the poor areas and we're going to put them in these schools and we're not going to consult with the parents. And the parents are like, no, that's not what we paid for. You ain't doing that to us. And it really got nasty. It was a lot of really well-to-do wine box drinking moms with their Manolo Blahniks and their Special Athleta leggings on, getting raucous up in those meetings, yelling about how they'd paid for certain school districts and they weren't about to let poor kids come in and lower their test scores. Oh, it got ugly. And again, one more time for those in the back, we ain't talking about any Republicans here. We're talking about Democrats in heavily Democrat-controlled, Democrat-populated New York, boroughs of Manhattan, the wealthiest boroughs, which again, in New York, you can have a Tony wealthy little area, and then right next to it, you can have an area that is, seriously working class. And so the schools in that area they're not performing as well. And this is something that it's so unfortunate that we can't deal in the truth here. And it's not about race, because Black kids and Hispanic kids can perform at the same level as any other kid when given the right background and resources. But if you have a bunch of, working class households where they're single parents, because you can be working class and have geniuses up at your kitchen table. There are plenty of kids who come from working class backgrounds that score. They outscore everybody else on the charts. And that's because their parents, working class, they're still pouring into those kids, reading to them, teaching them math, destigmatizing the tougher subjects. Kids, it doesn't matter the socioeconomics, although the socioeconomics do tend to trend. The poorer the family, the lower the educational outcome. But the way to combat that is to tell everybody what the secret is. The secret is you're reading to those kids. They're not watching TV during the week. And sports are not above athletics. I shouldn't say sports. Athletics are not above education. If you raise your kids in a household where they know that their sports are just a happy extra, they're a benefit, but that there is no, you're going to be in the NBA one day. Okay. You know what? If your kid is born and they're on track to be 6 feet 9 inches tall, then yeah, you probably can bank on that. But they still need to know how to read and do math at grade level and be able to graduate from college. So when they're done playing ball, they can, run a business, et cetera, et cetera. But outside of that tiny, teeny little genetic anomaly of kids who are going to end up in the NFL and the NBA and professional sports, your kids should know that all of the athletics are there to help them increase their physical stamina and for them to be physically fit and for them to have activities in which they can engage their friends. And it can be a family activity, but it should never be the primary. Your child should never be out in the driveway shooting hoops and bouncing a ball for a longer period of time than they spent reading and studying and doing their homework. And it's more than just, here are 3 worksheets my teacher gave me today and I'm going to do these 3 worksheets. No, it's, have you read the entire chapter for each of those worksheets? Have you studied anything that's referenced in those chapters? Have you checked that book out of the library? Have you looked it up on the internet? Have you went to see why is that book referenced in this chapter? It's also, you look over the homework and then you ask them, can you explain how you got to this answer? Show me. Do you have your work? Did you do the actual problem on a separate sheet of paper? Show me how you got here. It's a focus that you have, that you direct the kids to have that focus. So socioeconomics does not impact that. When we stop, acting as if it has anything to do with, well, the teacher doesn't like my child. He probably don't like your child because your child can't sit through just even one little lecture. Your child just is up and down, up and down. Your child won't shut up. You know why he doesn't like your child? Because when the teacher says, okay, everybody, it's time to pack up and move on to the next activity, your child is giving up the lip, giving some back talk. It's not that the teacher doesn't like your child because they're permanently tanned. It's because their mouth is permanently wide open with sarcastic comments coming out. Deal with the culture. Deal with that home culture. Because whatever is going on at your house, and this is the sad truth, y'all. Whatever's going on at your house with your kid is going on at school with your kid. If your kid is disrespectful at home, they're disrespectful at school. If your kid has an attitude at home, they have an attitude at school. If your kid refuses to do their homework, or if you, every time you leave the room, they're got the TV on behind your back, they're doing something similar to that in school. So if you raise those kids up to know, come on, when I get that phone call from your teacher, I'm not going to go in there and put my finger in their face and say, why are you talking about my kid? I'm going to go in there and be like, so what issue do we need to address with my child? What is going on? So not that you're against your child, and not that any teacher can get away with doing anything, but it only takes one time for you to have the teacher or the principal say your child has an in-school suspension, or your child is doing so-and-so, or I'd like to have a parent-teacher conference with you, and you show up in that building and you look that teacher in the face and say, I'm your partner. This is a three-legged stool. It's you as the teacher, the educational process, the child, and it's us, the parents. And we're partners, and we're going to work through this. Our child is here to get an education, and we respect your leadership. But know this, we're involved. We're plugged in. If you're teaching my child properly and doing everything according to what the curriculum has been laid out before us, we're all going to be totally on the same page. When teachers know that about you, that trust level goes through the roof, and their expectation for your child will go through the roof too. They'll be looking for ways to stimulate your child because they want to have something to share with you at that parent-teacher conference. And this is pretty universal. Unless your kid has a bad teacher, and we've been through that before. So it's, every teacher is not perfect, but our experience has largely been that most of the teachers are good. Some, there's a sliver of them that are kind of mediocre, and then there's a few bad ones. But for the most part, most of them, they're in the teaching profession because they enjoy teaching and interacting with kids. And if that teacher knows that you're at home and you're reinforcing what they're saying in the classroom, you're asking about their homework, you're going to show up for a couple of field trips a year. If she needs something in the classroom, you're going to say, oh, yeah, on the supply list, you asked us to send in a box of tissue. We sent in 3 just in case some other families can't do the tissue. There you go. It's not about throwing down huge sums of money or quitting your job and going and being her assistant. It's about showing that effort. Hey, we're partnering with you because I want this kid to have an education. Yes, I'm going to be sitting at graduation crying and thinking about the smaller years when they were 5 and they had the little munchkin voice and their cheeks were still fat. Yes, I'm going to be thinking, I just don't want them to go away to college. But the point is that they're going to be ready to go to college or the military or to training or whatever they're going to go do. And the minute you let the teacher know that, the minute you let the principal know that you're one of those families, that your kid is not one of those kids, that's when the educational thing, it starts to change for you. It changes for your child. The teacher expects better from them. Children respond to that. But if your child is going to be the one who's always mouthing off, always running in late, always they don't have their homework, they've got a fresh excuse on their lips every time they're asked a question, they're smart alecky, and they're there to entertain the rest of the kids in the class, then of course the teacher's not going to like your child. Who cares what kind of tan they've got? They could be purple spotted. They are a Billy bad butt, and they are a problem in the classroom. They're distracting and slowing down the momentum of the class. They're preventing the proper teaching of the curriculum and the items that need to be taught. They are a problem. So if you have one of those problem children, on your knees, ask God. First of all, ask for forgiveness. Get that out of the way. Repent, turn away from that sin. Cut that TV off. If you have to cut off every avenue, if you have to cut your Wi-Fi off, cut it off. Get the house in proper working order, and then tell your child, we've done you wrong. I apologize. We have actually allowed you to operate as an adult in this household, and now we are going to do it God's way. You are going to go into that classroom and you're going to behave, and I'm going to get with your teacher, and we're going to make sure that we are all on the same page and that you're getting an education, because if you don't get an education, you're going to have a straight pipeline to prison. And I'm going to be held responsible for that. So will you. I don't want God having that conversation with me. I'm not going to let him down on this job that he's given me to raise you upright. Kids respond to that. They want your attention. They want your approval. They want your love. But if they're not going to get it, they're going to have the little mouth going. They're going to have the little attitude going. They're going to be the class clown and entertain everybody else. And my parents used to always tell me, the class clown entertains the class. The class that's being entertained, those kids are learning and doing their homework. And when it comes time to move on to the next grade, they're prepared. And the class clown is sitting up. They made a lot of jokes and got a lot of laughs, but they don't know anything. So, I hope this isn't too real or too harsh, but it needs to be said. It's not about teachers not liking your child because your child is Black or Hispanic or white or what have you. It's your child's attitude in the classroom. Nobody likes a problem child. This is not just not just in education. This is those same people at work. I mean, have you not ever worked with somebody like that? Every time you turn around, you're like, oh, geez. Whoa. And your boss is like that too. They're like, whoa. You don't want that. Be in partnership with those teachers. And then if you're living in a neighborhood where the schooling isn't, you're not going to get that option, that school environment that you're looking for, then you have to go to those other options where you're like, you're homeschooling, you're doing a co-op, you are partnering with another group of families if there's no co-op. It's so interesting because all of the ones that we've been involved with or that we've known families from, when you talk to them, they'll say, oh, it's just like this one or two parents runs the whole thing. And when you talk to those one or two parents, they're like, oh, well, we had to take our kid out of this school district. It's usually that they kind of just answer a call. And then other parents come in and supplement. So I'm saying all of this to say that there's a way to get it done. But let's all own our part of it. And it's hard because looking at ourselves and saying, oh, this is my fault, especially with the parenting, keeps you up at night, you're crying, you're having all the issues. But God is able to come in at any point. And I'll leave you with this is encouraging. Back when this is before I was on school board, actually, I used to work on diversity committee. It was a volunteer thing. I didn't really work there. I volunteered there. And a bunch of us parents, and we would get these reports from the principal because she was this data analysis, she was a monster at data analysis, and she could do these amazing, she'd take information and she would put it into a form where we could kind of look at, this is what happened year over year when they did this, when they did that, et cetera, to try to figure out how to improve kids' test scores through learning. And she highlighted for us a school was able to get a year and a half worth of learning. So a school year is 10 months or 188 contact days here in the state of Missouri. Your state may be 190 or 176, whatever. They were able to get the equivalent of a year and a half worth of educational learning into kids. But the first thing they had to do was they had to get the parents to come in for a parent-teacher conference. And some of the teachers actually traveled to these kids' homes and rang the doorbell at dinner time and came in with a folder with their kids' work in it and got the parents on board by basically chasing them down and saying, you haven't been able to come in. I know you work 2 jobs, whatever. I need to talk to you about your kid. And once they got the parents on board, the kids came on board automatically because your kid is going to follow your lead. And then with the parents and teachers and the kid on board, they could take kids who were below grade level and get them up a whole year and a half in one school year. And they replicated these results in multiple different school districts with multiple different socioeconomics. So anything is possible with your kids' education if you just say to yourself, we're doing this thing right from now on. Let's get it. Pray over it. God will supercharge your results. All right, that's the show for today. God bless you from the heartland. Stacy Washington, StacyOnTheRight.com.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect